All right, this is the second part of the corrective feedback types, but it's the last of a four-part video series about error correction. This video continues to attempt to answer the question about how to provide correction. In the video right before this, we explained the 6 types of corrective feedback outlined by Lyster and Ranta. Since then, there have been some other types and methods of categorization presented. For example, what about paralinguistic feedback? There are many times when I will use an extra long pause, or a look, not a mean look, but a look, or a hand gesture to let the speaker know that there was a mistake that needed repairing. This would be a 7th type of corrective feedback. And by the way, if you use a hand gesture, it might be helpful to teach the students ahead of time what hand gesture you're going to mean, that you're going to use, and what the meaning of it is. Okay. When it comes to organization, some researchers feel like important divisions are between implicit and explicit correction. Instructors prefer implicit because they feel like it doesn't interrupt the conversational flow as much and it doesn't increase learner anxiety. But research almost always shows better uptake, or actual use of the correction, with almost any type of explicit feedback. The thing is that there's no rule saying you can't combine implicit recast with an explicit metalinguistic clue. All right, moving on. Shouldn't corrections be organized by whether they're needed because the meaning is not understood, or because the instructor is making a didactic or teaching point? Virtually all of the corrections on Lyster and Ranta's list, except for metalinguistic clues, can be seen in authentic conversations, which is why students get confused so often about whether the teacher is making a correction or whether they're just responding to the meaning. So some have suggested that recasts should be divided into conversational recasts, where understanding is the purpose, and didactic recasts, where teaching the correct way is the purpose. Another piece of the category puzzle is the linguistic purpose of the feedback. Lyster, Saito, and Sato, in their 2013 article, define positive corrections as those where students are informed of what is possible in the language, usually through examples. Negative corrections point out what should not occur in the language. They point out that explicit correction usually combines positive and negative feedback. So again, we see that it's not necessary to only use positive or only use negative feedback. The last aspect I'm going to mention here is whether the feedback should be focused or unfocused. This is actually a little different from everything else I've mentioned so far, because any of the methods mentioned can be used for either focused or unfocused. What do I mean? Well, focused correction is when the instructor ignores all mistakes except the type she's looking for. For example, if the pronunciation lesson was on stress, then every time the teacher heard a stress mistake, she would correct it. But if there were grammar mistakes, she would ignore them. Unfocused corrections are when the instructor tries to correct most, if not all, of the mistakes. While research clearly shows most students want this type of feedback, most teachers do not. Generally speaking, the instructor may settle for a version of unfocused feedback where any type of error can be confronted, as long as it either interfered with communication or it was clearly an unknown aspect of language as opposed to a slip of the tongue. Hopefully you now have a better idea about how you will provide error correction in your classroom. My suggestion, and research appears to support this, is to use a variety of methods of feedback. In fact, you can combine the methods to be most helpful. Also, you might want to have a class period or two where you go over the methods you are most likely to use and let the students know what they might look like. Furthermore, let them know that you expect them to repair their errors when you give feedback, and they can continue on after they have restated the sentence correctly. Many learners accept the corrections from the instructor without actually saying it themselves. Therefore, it can be helpful to explicitly let your students know you want them to repeat the correct form. In summary, Paralinguistic feedback is a commonly used type. Most feedback types can be organized into either implicit or explicit categories, or whether they are conversational or didactic, or into positive or negative linguistic feedback. Another way of looking at correction is whether it is focused or unfocused. Lastly, it can be helpful to teach the students about types of error correction and what you expect from them when you use a particular method.